asked a few questions, I began to realize that we have in our midst a very, very interesting person. And I also said, but you couldn't hear it before, that he was very, very lucky to have someone like June who would support him in what you were about to hear. Now, Alec told us at that time that he started his double or twin hobby at 7 or 8 years of age. And I think you said something, Alec, that went on about 57 years? Am I right? Or
Yeah.
now, if you started 7 or 8 years of age, I think that everybody here would like to learn how you actually got started.
Okay, first of all, I thank all of you for coming here. I didn't expect a crowd like this for a lecture, but however, this isn't going to be a lecture. It's just some of my life that I haven't talked about too much. However, at about eight years of age, for Christmas, I received a Meccano set. Now, I'm sure everybody's heard of it, maybe not familiar with Meccano sets, but this was a set of pulleys and wheels and flat plates, all perforated material that you could put together with nuts and bolts, and you could make whatever your imagination came up with. And over the years, I made many different items, trains and let's see, cranes and derricks and motor cars and ships and things of that sort. All of it is made with Meccano, if you have enough imagination. As well as that, they supplied you with an instruction book with many models in the book that you could make from your set. So over the years, I spent money on this because I got very interested in it. When I started to work, I used to go over to Church Street, and I worked at the Hermont building, which is at Dundas Square, and not far away, just a couple of blocks. So their main office in Meccano was over on Church Street. So I used to go over there after Christmas and see what they had for sale and damaged goods, because they used to make up models for Simpsons and Eaton's and some other places, like Atkins, and they had models in their store for Christmas. So when the Christmas and the season was over, they brought all this material back to the Meccano office, and they took it apart and put it back in stock what they could, and some of it was damaged. So I would wander over there sometime in early January, and I would say, what have you got that's you can't sell? I'll buy it. So I used to augment what I had as my own sets. I used to pick up a lot of this material at pretty good prices. However, that's getting away from the model trains and stuff. Just a minute. I managed to accumulate a large quantity of this stuff over the period of years, and that was the main hobby I had as a child, going on up through the time that I started working and on into the 50s. So I had a Meccano set for something like 40 years, and I made good use of it. Okay, Noel, you're next.
Thank you, Alec. Now, Alec has been mentioning the Meccano sets, but as you can see, and as some of you saw closely when I took it around, he really became very interested in trains. Now, he had told me that he had been given a train when he was about 7, a little wind up, and it went around a small area of tracks. And I have the feeling that was the seed that started all this later artwork. But anyway, after World War I beg your pardon, World War II, after World War II, in which Alec was in the RCAF and returned here, he told me that he got a little tired of mechano sets. I imagine his parents did too, because by the number that he built, he must have filled a couple of rooms. So he decided to switch back to trains. Perhaps you could get going on that for us, Alec, please.
Away from your mouth, just a little bit.
Don't talk too close. Okay. Well, I began becoming interested in trains when I saw some scale model train equipment that I had never realized was made with such detail before. So very soon after we've had 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, I decided to get into the train business. So I went over to the hobby store, which was very close over at Bay and Dundas. It was about a 10-minute walk from where I worked. So I picked up a boxcar, and I think the boxcar cost $1.89 at the time. And that was back in the 50s, and around 55 or 56. So during that time, the company that I worked for was called Safety Supply Company, and I was with the company for 47 years. I left them in 1986 after that length of time with them. So during the time I was with them, they were converting their shops, the warehouse, from wooden bunks to steel shelving for the equipment that they carried. So all this old lumber was going to waste until I decided that I could use it to build a model train layout in my basement. So I got all this free lumber, and I built a train layout in the basement of our house. And we started off with a room that was 10 feet by 13 feet deep. And I built the main layout in that particular area. And after that was built, shortly, a number of years later, we got rid of our old oil furnace and they put in a gas furnace. So the oil tank that was in the corner of the room was taken away, and the space behind the furnace was much more available. So I decided to add a branch line to this main layout. So I put some steel brackets on the wall. I just fastened the wall to the wall with inserts in the brick and screwed the wall to the brackets. And I made a layout that ran up the wall, and at the other end where the tank had been, I made out an area about 8 foot square, and I built a town there. And in that town, I built handmade a turntable, so that when the train got to that locale, I could put it on the turntable and turn the engines around so they could point the right way on the way back out. So from that beginning, I laid out track by hand, and put down ties and laid rails and made my own switches, and they were all electrically controlled from the panel that was controlled with the power pack that occupied the panel, and that ran the trains around. So I had quite a bit of equipment. I ended up with 187 cars and 16 locomotives, and maybe about 30 or 40 buildings that were made by hand on the layout, made from commercial kits, and a lot of it was made from my own plans and made from scratch material. And I'll show you one of them. The 2 of them are on the table here. One is a replica, a scale model of the Dawn Station that used to be down at Queen Street and King and Queen, where they branched off from each other at the Dawn Bridge. That railroad station is still in view at Riverdale Park. Now you can still go and see that railway station. And I built the water tower from scratch. It's made of wood and cardboard. And that was a water tower that was illustrated in the railroad magazine that I purchased every month for about 20 years. And during the process of building my layout, I decided in Confederation year 1967, I decided to build my own locomotive from brass. And I did this at lunch, on my lunchtime break during working hours. So the material that's in it belongs to Safety Supply Company because they bought the material and I used it because there was all kinds of loose material in the scrap bin, and I used most of that to build a particular locomotive, which is called a mogul locomotive. It's a 260. There's 2 leading wheels in the front to steer the locomotive around curves, and then there were 6 driving wheels. And it actually runs my electric motor that's in it, and it runs on 12 volts. And for a few years that used to run around on my own layout, dragging a train behind it. I had a similar commercial model of the same particular engine, and so I had 2 of them. One I made myself and another one that was commercially available. So in the process of putting this together, I took about 5 or 6 years to finally make a whole railroad business or empire in the basement of the house. And I had this railroad in the basement for something like 37 years. And I had trains running around every day of the month. And I had an excellent time with it. And it filled a lot of my spare time, and it kept me at home where my wife knew where I was. Okay, well, I'll hand it back to Noel, and he can carry on from here.
You don't get a break that easily, Alec. I'm just going to make a couple of suggestions and give this back to you, because sitting here and listening to you is the easiest job I've had in a long time. But you mentioned that you started 10 by 13. You built it up about so high, and you built hills, and you put trees on them you made yourself, and you made a background and painted it, and you started on towns. Now, I'm going to ask you to speak specifically about the background that you painted, how you got it on the wall, about how big it was, and then I want you to give us the names of some of the towns that you built and where the names came from.
Okay, well, the backdrop, at the end of the speech here, there's a volume of my pictures of the layout, which is the only thing I have left, except for the 3 pieces that I salvaged from my train layout. But there's a book here you can look through and see how big this thing was. However, the backdrop, I decided instead of looking at a cinder block wall, I would put up masonite on the wall, and I did. I put it up, I drilled the blocks with a drill and put a plastic insert in there, and then I put the masonite up on the wall with screws into the masonite, and that hung the masonite panels on the wall. And after that was all up around the perimeter of the railroad, I went to the hardware store and bought a gallon of sky blue paint, which was very light, and I painted the whole thing with a bright blue, or sky blue rather, from one end of the place to the other. The 10 by 13 wall, it was 13 feet deep, 10 feet wide, and then the rest of the wall that I made the branch line to ran up the wall in the basement another 50 feet, so I had quite a bit of background, or backdrop. Well, after that had been painted blue, I went about painting it with acrylic paints that I had for my artwork, and I painted the clouds, and I painted a backdrop on it, including buildings and scenery on the backdrop, so that it was part of the railroad layout. And the backdrop served as a sort of what do you call it? I've lost the